Hello, and welcome to the fourth installment of this Blender Smoothie tutorial series on creating a Christmas tree in Blender. This is the final part in the tutorial series, with the exception of a bonus tutorial at the end. It sort of goes along with the Christmas tree idea, but technically it's not a part of the actual Christmas tree, so I figured I wouldn't make it an official part of the series. Today we're going to be creating the ornaments, including the star on the top of the tree, and the base of the tree, and then finalizing everything with a little bit of compositing. So let's get started by creating the ornaments. I'm going to go to another layer to do that, just so the tree isn't in the way. Go to this layer here, and just going to add a UV sphere. So Shift-A, add UV sphere. Oops. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to center my cursor. Re-add it. There we go. Okay. Alright, first of all, let's set the shading to smooth, and let's give it a Subsurf Modifier. Keep the levels at 1. Depending on the size of these, we could be deleting the Subsurf Modifier, but I suspect we'll be keeping it, just because the glossiness on these orbs looks kind of weird when there aren't as many faces, even if the ornaments are smaller. To help reduce the poly count, I'm going to go into Edit Mode and delete this top vertex, so all those little triangles at the top there, just because we're going to be putting a little top on the ornament, so there's no need for there to be any faces there. And let's create that now. I'm going to drag a box around these top vertices, and duplicate them, and maybe scale that up a little bit, and I'm going to make that a separate object. So pressing P, making that separate. It's just a lot easier to control as far as shaders and whatnot go if it is a separate object. And I'm going to press Shift Control Alt C and choose Origin to Geometry, just so that the origin point is in the center there, so it's not going all out of whack when I'm trying to adjust the scale and everything. And we'll go back into Edit Mode and extrude that up maybe about that far. Extrude one more time, scale it in, just like that, and extrude one more time, and merge those vertices in the center. Alright, this still has the Subsurf Modifier and everything applied to it, so I'm going to add an edge loop right there. Move that up to the top, just so we can sharpen that area up a bit. And I'm actually going to delete this vertex, select this edge loop, and extrude up one more time. Then extrude again, and merge those. And add another edge loop up there, and down there. Just sharpen that up. And I'll smooth that right now, while I still remember to do it. Alright. Maybe I can make sure that's right above there. Alright, now I just need to add a little hook of sorts so that there's actually something to hang it to the branch. So I'm going to add a Bezier curve there, move that up, rotate it along the x-axis 90 degrees. I can never get the scaling of this straight. Scale that down, rotate that, I think, whoa. Still a little. Alright, we'll rotate that around 40 degrees. So that they're about at the same angle there. And I'll scale that down. Move that right above there. And we'll rotate these a little more. Maybe. Now we'll go with 25. And negative 25 for this, since it's the mirror image. And I'm going to move these a lot closer together, too. Maybe even rotate those a little more. Oops. Something like that. And then we can probably scale these along the z-axis as well. That's way too tiny, though. Alright, select this and press Control plus to expand the selection a couple times, and then we'll scale that out along the X and Y axes. To do that, just press S, then Shift Z, so that it scales along the other axes that aren't the Z axis, so in this case X and Y. We'll make it about that big, probably. And we can scale this up then. Something more like that. Maybe scale it down along the Z axis a little bit. Just like that. Okay. Now we've just got to give it a bit of thickness, so we'll come over here, change that to full, so that it's filling the entire curve and not just half. And we'll increase the bevel depth a little bit. Just something like that. Yeah, maybe 0.025. And I don't think there's any need to increase the bevel resolution, because it's going to be pretty tiny. Might want to make it a little thicker, though. 0.03. Maybe 0.035. That'll work. Okay. I'm just going to convert this to a mesh. Alt-C, convert to mesh. And I'm just going to join these two objects. First, I guess I have to apply the Subsurf Modifier. I don't know if I even need it. Yeah, I don't think I do. So, actually, I'm going to delete that edge loop. Just so it's not super sharp up there. Okay, and then we can join these, Control J, and we might as well relocate the object origin too. Alright, so that's pretty much it as far as modeling goes. Now we just have to work on getting a good looking shader. So we need a light in here first of all. Maybe I can find one. We'll just duplicate this. Move it to the same layer as the orb. Alright, we'll move it a little closer just so we can see a little better. Probably have to adjust the strength. Yeah. Make that 50. No, we'll do 100. 150. That works. Okay. Yeah, so let's split the window here and change this to the node editor. Scroll in on the mouse wheel to zoom in a bit. And we'll start with the orb itself. So we'll select that, click New to add a new material, make sure you're on the shader nodes there and not the compositing nodes or the texture nodes. And we're going to mix a diffuse and a glossy shader, I think. So I'm going to add a glossy shader and a mix shader to combine the two. Something like that. Now, that reflection is a bit too glossy for my taste. There are varying levels of gloss in Christmas tree orbs. Some of them are really, really blurry, like this one is right now, and then some of them are really sharp. I'm going to go for a sharper look. So, I'm going to change the roughness to 0.025, just to really bump up that sharpness. Maybe even 0.015. Okay, so that works pretty well. I'm actually going to increase this to 0.75 so there's more glossiness and less diffuse. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Then there's one other thing that I think I want to do. First of all, let's give this a color. Change this to start out with a red one. Maybe sort of a reddish purple one, something like that. Make that darker too. Maybe we should change the color of this too. Make that a nice dark, deep red. Something like that. I think that works pretty well. But one other thing I want to do really quickly is give this a bit of a Fresnel, I believe it's pronounced. Probably pronouncing it wrong, but I think you know what I'm talking about. Just a little bit of the sort of a, not quite a glow, but kind of a, the reflection sort of piles up a little bit more around the edges of the sphere. So basically we would be seeing it would sort of light up around the edges here. Let me just show you really quickly. Basically, I'm just going to add another mix shader, and I'll add a diffuse shader, like that, mix those two together. And for the input, right there, I'm going to add this node right here, and connect that to the factor there, and now we have that nice glossy effect on the outside as well. And yeah, that's exactly what we're looking for. Might want to adjust, maybe adjust this a little bit, 0.4, 0.2, just to sort of push it out a little bit more, something like that. The lower you make this value, then the farther away it pushes the white areas on the edges. So we'll make that 1.2. Just something like that. That looks pretty good. Maybe 1.25. Expand it a little more. Alright. So that's pretty much it for the material of the orb itself. I'm actually going to drop that to 0.01, make the reflections a little sharper. Now we can work on this material for the top up here. Actually, you know what? Let's name this first. Call it Red Orb. Alright, now we can add a new material for this. And we'll just name this before we go any farther, and we'll name it Orb Top. And again, I'm going to mix a diffuse shader and a glossy shader. So we'll add a glossy shader right here. And I just want to make this a nice gold color. Yeah, so let's start with that. First of all, I'll make those both a little brighter. I want to make the reflections on this a lot sharper too, so 0.01 for that as well. Maybe increase that to 0.75. Maybe not quite as much, maybe 0.65. Alright. You can see we're starting to get a couple fireflies up here in the orb. Hopefully that won't be as much of an issue later when the orbs are a lot smaller and we've tweaked this material a bit more. So let's change this to a gold color. Maybe something sort of like that. It's always kind of difficult to get the material to look the way you want it to. Maybe something like that, but a lot brighter. I think that'll work. And I actually think I'm going to have two different glossy levels here, which makes it look a little more interesting. I'm actually going to increase this to maybe 0.2, maybe 0.5, make it really glossy. Or maybe 0.35, something like that. I might just make this, yeah, a little lighter like that, and I'll lower the mix factor to something like 0.4. And then I'm going to duplicate this, combine those with a much sharper reflection value. Something like that. Maybe make that a little more gold. So now we should have sort of the softer reflections and the sharper reflections. Looks maybe a little plasticky. But then again, sometimes the orbs do have plastic at the top. So, I think that'll work. I might want to make this maybe a little whiter. Make that a little wider too. Just something like that. Yeah, that's good enough. So, we'll duplicate this a couple times actually. Let me go back into solid view. And select both of these, duplicate them, grab this, and we'll make this a single user, and I'm going to call this yellow orb, and we'll give this some more yellow color. Change that to something more like that, maybe, and make that a lot brighter, give it something more like that. Alright, that looks pretty good. And yeah, I think those colors will work pretty well. Maybe make that even a little brighter, actually. Give it a little more color. There we go. Okay, so these are the two orbs we're going to be using. Typically, when it comes to scattering these across the tree, I've found that the best way to do it is manually. I know that particle system sounds like it might be a good idea at first, and depending on how you work it, it could be. But I found that typically whenever I try to use a particle system, the results always look pretty unnatural, with the orbs going in sort of awkward angles and whatnot, and then I have to go in and adjust them anyway. So I found that it's best to just add the orbs manually. So let me go ahead and move both of these back to the layer with the tree. Alright, so that's typically what I do. I don't add too many of them. Basically just try to hang them around the branch. Even try to get the branch through the loop of the ornament if you can. It adds a little bit more realism even if it's not that noticeable. So basically that's all you have to do is duplicate these orbs a couple times, put them in different spots in the tree. It's like you're decorating a Christmas tree in real life pretty much. But I'm not going to make you sit there and watch me do this, so pause the recording and I'll be right. Alright, well, now that we're done with that, I noticed something that we're going to have to change about the orb materials. If I switched over to rendered view right now and took a look at this, the orbs are pretty dark. A lot of them are in the shadow over there, obviously, but especially over here, not really seeing very much. Part of that is because this light up here is pretty dim, so I'm actually going to increase that to 200. Oops. Maybe even higher than that. I might go 250, because that was pretty dark. Other than that, it looks like we're going to have to really tweak these orb materials a little bit more. So let's go back into solid view here and select one of these orbs. We'll start with the red one. That's pretty simple to do from here. We can just brighten these up. Maybe even brighten that. So that should help with that. Maybe we can brighten the diffuse node there as well. Let's see if that helped at all. Alright, that helped a little bit. Yeah, they're still pretty dark. Might see if I can increase these a tiny bit, maybe 0.02. Just to adjust the sharpness of those reflections a little more. Yeah, let's see yellow one too. Maybe do the same there. Other than that, we could probably adjust this and make that a little less glossy overall. Maybe make it something like that, so that more of the brighter diffuse color is shining through. I wonder, no, it's as bright as it can be. Alright, we'll see if this helped at all. Alright, that's good enough. They're already going to be kind of overshadowed by the Christmas tree lights anyway. So that'll do for now. Alright, then there's only one more thing to do on the tree itself, I mean aside from the base, and that's the star on top. So, to do this, let me see here. First of all, I'm going to merge those two windows again, just because it's kind of in the way. But we'll come back over here, and I'm going to press Ctrl-Alt-U to open the add-ons, or the user preferences, and then we'll go to the add-ons tab. And under, I believe it is object? No, it's probably mesh. It's add mesh, sorry. Under extra objects, you can click that to enable that, close out of this. And now if we press Shift-A, we have access to these extra objects. I believe it's right here under basic objects that you can add a star. So we'll go ahead and add that. We're going to be modifying this pretty heavily, so let's start by rotating it this way, just so it's upright. And I'm going to delete both of those center vertices, so that all we're left with is this, and I'll delete those bottom ones as well. Then I'll move that down to about the center there, so it's equal with the object origin. Okay. Basically what I want to do here is we want to, first of all, add some sort of beveling to the star, and then we also want to add some sort of shaft at the bottom so that it has a way of actually being attached to the Christmas tree, so it's not going to fall off. We're going to start with that. I'm just going to, no, better yet, I'm going to press Control-R and insert edge loops. In this case, they're just 2 vertices right there. And I am going to, can I slide those? I don't think I can, but I'm going to check. Slide. No, okay. Alright, so actually we'll undo that. And I'm going to press Control-R and scroll up with my mouse wheel once, twice, just like that. And then I'm going to do the same over here. Scroll up once, twice. And now if we switch back to vertex mode, there we go. Yeah, so we have these vertices up here, which is what I was looking for. And I am actually going to move those down a little bit, right about there. Alright, and I'm just going to, first of all, delete those vertices and make that a single face. And this is going to be the opening that we can use to extrude out for the base of the star. Alright, I'm actually going to scale these out along the x-axis a tiny bit, just a little bit so that that star feature still shows. And, whoa, okay. I'm going to move these down just a little bit farther for now, and we're going to come back to that. Right now I'm just going to give it a face right there, add an edge loop, move that edge loop up, just like that. Alright, and that's all we're going to do there for now. So now I've got to select all of these vertices. Like I said before, we're just going to sort of bevel the edges here. But to do that, I'm going to extrude these vertices, scale them in, and I'm just going to merge them in the center there. And then raise that up. And now we should be able to go around and fill these faces. Whoa, oops. Got a little bit of a problem there. Alright, let's just start filling these in as triangles. Work with those. Keep filling those in. Oops. There we go. And those ones as well. Now we have a shape there. Yeah, something like that. And alright, now all we have to do is basically flip it so that it's on the underside as well. So to do that, I'm just going to add a mirror modifier. Find it right there. And I'm going to mirror it along the z-axis, just like that. Enable clipping. And just got to select those and sort of move them closely together until they are merged. Exactly like that. And I'm going to apply that modifier. So, now we have a complete star, just like we wanted. I'm actually going to select both of these, scale those up along the z-axis a little bit more, just so that that's more of an even star pattern. Yeah, so we have something like that. Then I'm going to maybe move that down a little bit more and scale it up a little bit more. Something like that. Okay, that's the part that's going to go over the top of the Christmas tree. At this point, I can probably start smoothing these out a little bit more. Going to add edge loops to all of those spots. And select all of those newly added edge loops. Press Shift or S and Shift Y to scale them out along the S and the X and the Z axes. Sorry. Just to sort of smooth that out a little bit more. So it looks something like that, and I'm going to do that one more time. Adding an edge loop there, 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 just like that. Then I'm going to select all of these newly added edge loops. Alright, and do the same thing, S, Shift Y, just to sort of smooth that out a bit more. Alright, and now we have something like that. If I change that to smooth shading, it should look a little bit better. We'll have to recalculate the normals by pressing Control N. And it should work. Let me try something here. I'm going to add a Subsurf Modifier. Just like that. To hopefully help smooth out this base part a little bit. I'm going to Control E. Mark sharp. No, it doesn't work. Alright. You know, let's undo that. Okay, I think in order to get this to work effectively, probably going to have to come down in here, see if I can. We'll add an edge split modifier and see where that goes. There. Alright, that automatically helps a lot with the star, but we're still having some issues right here, so maybe we can lower that angle a bit more. Oops. And to increase that angle a bit more. Oop. Okay, so let's smooth that out pretty well. This looks like it's still an issue here. Maybe we can sort of move these up over along the y-axis there. We scale them in along the x-axis just to sort of smooth that out a little bit more. Yeah, that'll work. Should probably see how this looks with the shader added. Before that, I'm going to try one other thing, just to see how this works. Yeah, that's not going to work with the edge split modifier. So I'm going to apply this, then add a bevel modifier. It still doesn't want to work. Okay, let me undo all of that. Okay, well, let's see here. Alright, so essentially it looked like the best thing to do was to separate this mesh from the star. So to do that, all you have to do is select all of this component here when it's still joined with the star, and with it all selected, press P, and it'll allow you to separate it from the main star object. And then from there you can add a Subsurf Modifier to this shaft here, and then tweak it a little bit to make it look nice and smooth. So, alright, that's essentially it for the star then. Now we can start working on a material to make it look a lot nicer. So let's go into rendered view here, and I'm just going to rotate these 90 degrees along the x-axis. And we can split the view here, go to the node editor. I'm actually going to apply this Subsurf modifier and apply the edge split modifier and just join the two. And we'll add a new material and name it star. Alright, and this is going to be pretty similar to the top of the ornament. But we're going to try to give this maybe a little bit of a texture to it. So I'm going to add a mix shader and a glossy shader, as usual. And we'll try to give this a nice gold color. Something like that. And increase the brightness of that. Something like that as well. And we'll leave the roughness at about the value that it's at. maybe a little less, we'll make it 0.1. Basically, I want to add a bit of a bump map to this to give it sort of a kind of a bumpy gold texture. So I'm going to add a noise texture. And for starters, I'm just going to run that straight into the displacement, and immediately we get this, which looks pretty bad. We can zoom out a little bit more. I want to, first of all, maybe adjust the scale a little bit, make that 10 instead of 5, something like that. And I would also like to be able to adjust the strength of this, so let's add a math node, change that to multiply, and now we can adjust the factor by adjusting this value here. So we'll make that about a 0.25, just to give the star a little bit of bumpiness like that. And I think I'm going to try giving this the same effect we did to the edges of the orb. See how that looks. So we'll add a mix shader here, and a new diffuse shader. Combine those, make this diffuse shader white, and add this node as an input. May or may not work well. Check and see how this looks. Maybe we can actually give it sort of a darker tint, darker green tint, something like this. Maybe adjust value of that. That looks pretty good. That's really, really subtle, but I think it works. Maybe a little too much. Make that more like that. Okay. And I think that'll do for our star. Just one other thing that I want to do really quickly that I actually forgot to do earlier is I want to give this a little bit of solidity. So I'm going to extrude that, scale that in, and extrude it up as well. Scale that in, just so it has some thickness to it. And then I'm going to add an edge loop down here to get rid of that weird shading. Alright, so you can move this now to the same layer as the tree. Move it up, all the way up there, right to the top. And I can sort of press G and Shift Z again to move it along the X and the Y axes. Maybe move it over on the Y a little bit. Our tree is leaning, so might have to accommodate for that. And okay. Now I want to make it so that actually I'm going to press Alt-R to clear the rotation. Then I'll rotate it along the X-axis 90 degrees, rotate it that way a little bit, just because I want this to be facing the camera without having to rotate the whole tree. So I'm just going to rotate that something like that. Alright. And then maybe move that over a little bit. Rotate that down slightly, very slightly. Alright. Okay. That'll work. So there's the star. Move that down a little bit more. Maybe something more like that. Scale it up a little bit maybe. Oh, it's actually pretty big. I'm going to scale it down a tiny bit. Okay, and that's it for the star. So we've done the bulk of the work now on the tree itself. All that's left to work on is the base, which is going to be pretty simple. I'm just going to merge these two windows. I'm going to split my window here, and I'm going to change this to the UV image editor. Oops. Recenter the cursor there. Basically, all we have to do is create a nice, simple shape like this. I'm not going to worry about the lever on the back there. It's going to look just fine without it. So we just have to worry about modeling this main element here, and then maybe these little claws that are kind of holding the tree in. So let's go into the second layer again, and make sure we can get this centered. And I'm going to add a circle. Alright, and just sort of follow along with the reference image. It doesn't have to be exact. I'm just going to scale that in, something like that. Keep extruding in, scaling in. And just want to keep working on this. Getting these areas looking good. Move that up a little bit. Alright, that'll be good enough for that part. I'm going to extrude that down a little bit. Okay, there's our basic base shape. I'm going to scale it along the z-axis a little bit too, just so it's a little taller. Then I'm going to give it a Subsurf Modifier. Smooth that out quite a bit. And I'm going to sharpen up some of these edges here, just so they look a little better. All along these areas. Maybe even along there too. And finally one in here. Okay, so yeah, there's the base pretty much. And now all we've got to model are these little claws. There's actually a little bit of an extra shape in here. Let's do that really quickly. I'm just going to add a plane and scale it down, rotate it 45 degrees, press X, delete only faces, maybe scale that up a little bit more, something like that. And then I'm just going to move this up to right about there, press E to extrude up, just so we have this shape here. I'm actually going to scale that in a little bit, something like that. And I'm going to select the whole thing and extrude, then press S, Shift Z, to scale it in along the X and Y axes. And I'll give this a Subsurf Modifier as well, just so it's not perfectly sharp. Put an edge loop there, an edge loop there, 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 along all those areas. And we'll do one more up there and one more down there. Alright, select Smooth Shading. Messed up the normals a bit, so we'll select everything and press Control N to get rid of those weird black lines in the edges there. Okay, scale that up along the z-axis a little bit. I'm actually going to move this down farther, press E to extrude, and M to merge those. I'm going to add an edge loop there. And I'm going to select these lower parts, move them down, just like that. Okay. Yeah, so now all we have left to worry about really are these claws on the sides. So to do that, I'm just going to come over here and add another plane, maybe move that over, scale that down quite a bit, extrude it up, something like that, extrude it in, scale it in along the x-axis, and a little bit along the y-axis as well. I'm going to move it forward on the x-axis a bit. And I'm going to extrude that, actually before I do that, I'm going to scale that in along the x-axis even more. Something like that. And extrude it again. Move it out along there. Extrude it out about that far. Extrude it again. Extrude it again. And one more time along there. And I'm just going to add a Subsurf Modifier again. And we'll add some edge loops all along here to sharpen up those areas, and along there and there. Alright. And two more there. And that is our basic claw shape. I might want to move that back, maybe a little more. Just that. Rotate that so that's nice and flat. And that'll probably work. I want to scale that in along the y-axis a little bit more, just so it's nice and thin. Alright, and now I think I'm going to adjust that a little bit more, make it something more like that. Rotate that a little bit, rotate that. Maybe we'll just make it so that it goes sort of straight up, kind of like that. Yeah, that works. Okay, so there's our basic claw. Just got to rotate that 90 degrees and position it on the base here. Put it right about there. Scale it down. Maybe scale it up a little bit more. Scale it down along the z-axis too, so it's not quite as tall. Move that down to about there. And I'm going to move that in a little bit more, just so it's right there on the edge. Alright, and just to make this simple, so that we don't have to reposition every claw, I'm just going to really quickly press the, I believe it's the period key. Yep. Alright, and now what this does is basically it's going to manipulate objects around the cursor, which is in the center. So I can just press Shift-D, duplicate, and rotate by pressing R 90, Shift-D, R 90, and Shift-D, R 90. So it just rotated them right around the 3D cursor there. And now we have these 4 claws. Just realized that I actually think that's a pentagon, but doesn't matter. This is close enough. So let's join these together first of all. Press Ctrl-J to join them. And let's just give these some quick materials. It doesn't have to be perfect. They're just going to be some pretty basic plasticky looking materials. So let's add a new node. We'll call this black plastic. And we are going to mix it with a glossy shader just to give it kind of a bit of a gloss there. Not anything really sharp, of course, but just enough to give it a tiny bit of reflectivity. Increase the brightness of those. Switch to rendered view, and we'll make this, we'll just make it a solid black. We'll increase the roughness to 0.4 and lower that mix to 0.1, just so we have something like that, maybe even a little lower than that, maybe 0.06. And I am actually going to make this a little bit brighter, just because I don't want it to be quite a solid black there. And we're going to give that same material to this right there, just so those are alike. And I'm actually going to, let's add a new material for this and call it green plastic. But I am also going to add a new material slot and add the black plastic because I would like to apply that to this bottom part right here. So go into edit mode and click assign to assign that to the bottom there. Alright. You know, actually I think I'm just going to extend that all the way up. So I'll just assign that there. Whoa. Alright, that's not what I meant to do. We'll assign that there. Okay, that works. Not sure what color it really is down there, but we'll just make it black so it can sort of obscure the bottom of the base a little bit more. And really then all that's left is to give it the green plastic material. I am going to give it a bit of a yellow plastic thing down here. So we'll just add some edge loops there. Select this, expand the selection. There's edge loops. We'll just keep this yellow plastic from expanding too far. Make that a single user. Call it yellow plastic. And we'll just do the same thing that we did with the black plastic, where we're just going to add a mix shader, combine it with a glossy shader, something like that. We'll increase the roughness to 0.4, lower that to 0.06, and we'll give this a nice yellow-green color, something like that, and assign it to that. So we should see that little strip, that little strip of yellow there. It just adds a nice touch. I guess we'll do the same thing to this part up here. Just expand that, assign it to there as well. Yeah, right there. Looks pretty good. And then on the green plastic, we'll just simplify this. We'll load yellow plastic, make it a single user, rename it green plastic, and we'll just change the color to a nice dark, kind of a pine green, something like that. Looks about right. We'll render that. Okay, that looks pretty good. Might want to make it a little less green, maybe a little darker. A little more blue in there too. Just to get something like that. And I'm going to go back to the yellow plastic too and kind of decrease the brightness of that because it's pretty intense. And that's pretty much it. I'm actually going to, on the green plastic, I think I'm going to increase the roughness to 0.5 just to spread that out a little bit more. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the base. So go back into solid view and we'll combine these windows, and I'm going to move this back to the layer with the tree. Get it positioned. Make sure the scaling... Oh, forgot. These aren't part of the same object. Move those over with it. Alright. And now make sure everything's selected. And we can switch this back to median point, because we don't have to worry about... Oops. Maybe not median point. Yeah, median point. Just so we don't have to worry about trying to position it around the cursor. And I'm just going to quickly hide all these needles so I can see at least a little better. Alright. Yeah, that looks like it's positioned nicely. And that's it for the modeling. As far as that goes, this looks a little tiny, so I'm going to scale that up maybe just a little bit more. And we will do it around the 3D cursor this time, just so we can make sure it stays in the same spot there. Scale that up. And we'll move that up too, just so the base kind of covers all that extra tree trunk there. Alright, and that's it for the modeling portion, and pretty much everything we have to do on the tree. So all that's left is compositing. I'm going to give this a quick render. Let me adjust my dimensions here a little bit. Probably do 1000 by 1500 maybe. Yeah, that'll work. And whoa, position that. Alright, and I'm going to give this a quick render. Pause the recording so you don't have to sit through it, because I'm rendering it with a lot of samples. I'm actually going to lower that just for the sake of the tutorial. We'll make it 750 instead. So I'm going to render that really quickly, and I'll see you when I'm done. Alright, so the render's done. Before I go any farther, I would like to point out that, yeah, red and green tree lights really clash with red and yellow ornaments, but whatever. You can use whatever colors you want on your lights. My goal is to just show you these quick compositing techniques. So let's go into the Compositor. We'll just switch to the compositing setup here. I'd already merged these windows earlier when I tested this out, but you're free to merge any additional windows you want to sort of free up some space. It doesn't require a lot of space anyway, though. So I'm just going to move these around a bit. And we'll turn on Backdrop and add a viewer node so we can actually see what we're doing. The backdrop there. Alright. So basically all we want to do is add, first of all, a glare filter. And we'll connect that with the viewer node there. We're going to start with a fog glow. And we're going to change the quality from medium to high. And that gives it a really nice glow. I think it works pretty well. Then, in addition to that, you can also duplicate the glare node. Add it again, and change the fog glow to streaks. and then typically use 9 or 10 streaks. Try 10 and see how that looks. I think 9 works pretty well. Yeah, so that you get something like that. Obviously, that's way too intense. So I typically adjust the fade a tiny bit. Maybe bring that down to 0.8, just to shorten those a bit more. And then I'll typically add a color mix node, and I will combine those two. And then add maybe a factor of like 0.5 or something, just so that a little bit of the glare shines through, maybe even 0.75. Yeah, something more like that. We can increase that to make these streaks a little longer. There we go. Something more or less like that. And then you simply drop that into the composite node, and go back to your UV image editor here, and we'll switch this from render result to viewer node. And there you can save your image from there just by pressing F3. And as far as compositing goes, that's really it. 2 really simple nodes to add. And yeah, that's the end of the Christmas tree tutorial series, minus the bonus tutorial, which I'll be releasing sometime at the beginning of next week, before Christmas. And I hope you appreciate that. I also hope you've enjoyed this tutorial series and that you've learned something out of it. So that's all. Thanks for watching.